Up. And everyone everywhere, Tampa Motor Mouth in the zone and behind the microphone, all crazy all the time. Joel Verone along with
Flying Ryan Gogolsher with you today.
I'm right, and you think something significant might have happened on Monday Night Football this week?
Just a little something.
Just a little, like it didn't blow up Twitter or anything?
No, it didn't almost collapse the social networking site whatsoever. But we will get to that in a little bit. We're going to get to that later, mostly because if we do it now, that'll be the only thing we probably talk about the entire time. So
since we can get fixated on one subject rather easily, as much as we can get distracted rather.
And that one's actually a pretty easy one to get distracted on. So we're going to start with the MLB playoffs that are only a couple weeks away at this point. About 8 or 9 games left for some teams.
And we were just looking at the cool standing site, which, although I think you do have an interesting question, which is how do they come up with these numbers?
Yeah. I mean, they have people before they've played a game at 50% and then some teams at 6%. And I know you can kind of tell the Astros are the Astros, but what gives them the ability to know that the Rays are 50% and the Yankees are maybe 7%? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that being said, we're coming down the stretch. A lot of playoff tickets have been punched in the NL. I believe all 3 divisions have at least their team in. The Giants, I think, just clinched.
Might have heard the Reds.
The Reds clinched about 3 months ago. And the Nationals are about to clinch. They're already in the playoffs. The Braves, I think, are about to clinch a wild card. And the Nationals all but
and the last time the Nationals or a team in baseball in Washington clinched, neither one of us were alive.
Yeah, it was like never, I think. No.
1933.
1933.
I think slightly before never.
Slightly before never.
Unless we had access to a DeLorean and a flux capacitor at 1.21 gigawatts, we probably couldn't go and see the game.
Yeah, and no tickets have been punched in the AL as of yet. The Rangers are practically assured at this point. The Yankees look like they're in a very good position to make it.
They're playing the Twins right now, so that's...
Yeah, that should be about it to clinch them. The AL Central, of course, is tied between Chicago and Detroit, and the wild card race is still up in the air. Tigers and White Sox, I guess, are now still in it, but they're both well back of the wild card. The Orioles and the A's right now hold it.
Just a bit outside.
Yeah, that's going to be a division winner, and that's it, I believe. But you have the Angels still in the mix, the Rays, the Orioles, and the A's right now holding on to it. Then again, we were here last week, and we were looking at the Rays going, they're done. They are done. They've hung around.
Weren't we ripping on the offense?
Yeah, ripping on the offense. Ripping on the offense, and then they proceed to put up 13 runs that night, 7 the next, and a 6-run ninth, and 12, then 11. Throttling teams. And they've won the 2 after that, 5-0 and 3-2, or 3-0 and 5-2, I believe.
David Price with the complete game last night. So who would you think, quick audible, should be up for the Cy Young between David Price or Fernando Rodney on the week? Granted, I know there are other teams out there going, oh, what about this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy? Just between those two. I know it's 2 different positions.
Well, it's got to be David Price just because he's a starter. I think it's going to come down to him or Verlander. Most likely, Sale's kind of falling off.
Taking off Justin Verlander's start in the All-Star game, of course.
Yeah, thankfully the All-Star game doesn't count for anything but home field advantage in the World Series. But I do think that David Price has a great shot at winning it, and if the Rays, can get into the playoffs, the Angels are not in it right now, so Weaver might get knocked out. And they don't like to pick MVPs or Cy Youngs on teams that miss the playoffs when there's another candidate on a team that makes the playoffs. So it could be very, very interesting to see if the Rays miss the playoffs, if David Price really has any shot, or if they make it, if he's going to get a little boost.
Well, of all the teams left that the Rays have to play, beating Toronto is just Toronto. They've given up. I don't know. If you think Toronto was in another division, would they have a shot? Kind of like if the Rays were in another division?
Yeah, I think all 5 teams in the AL East, if they were in another division, even Boston, would have a shot. If they put them in the AL Central, I think all of those teams would likely win their division.
And what do you think about the upcoming series with the Rays against the White Sox? Are you as concerned about that series as I am?
Well, at this point, you got to be concerned about every game until that final series. Because if they can win the next 5 going into that series, worst case scenario is they'll most likely be within striking distance of a wild card spot. Right now they're 3 back. With 3 games to play, they would still have a shot at it. But if Baltimore loses a game or 2, they're still in it to catch Baltimore. And Baltimore or Tampa Bay will be making the postseason. I don't think there's any way both of them get knocked out and say the A's or the Angels both make it. Not knowing exactly what the Angels and A's last games of the year are against. They might even be head-to-head. But that being said, I do think that one of the Orioles and the Rays... Yes, I do think one of the Orioles and Rays teams will get in. I do not know if both of them can get in, saying they're going head-to-head the last week of the season. But, quick check of the last few games... Just who's playing who. The Rays are playing the White Sox, as we mentioned. The Orioles go against the Red Sox. Doesn't seem like a big series, but Red Sox can come up and snakebite them. We saw what happened last week against the Rays.
We still all remember that one pitch that Ellsbury hit out. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
that sparked a little confrontation between Molina and Cobb. Mm-hmm. Although, if you did see last night, Molina actually did get injured running to first base.
I didn't see that, but I'm not entirely surprised. The Mariners are playing the Athletics. Not necessarily the best matchup if you're a Rays fan. The Angels are going to be wrapping up a series with the Mariners. And then going to play the Rangers. So the Angels might not have a great shot because they're going to be playing a team that's
when Texas is on fire, they can annihilate you.
Yes, and then
we know that as Rays fans.
Of course, starting on October 1st, the Rays are going to play the Orioles. The Athletics finish up with the Rangers. The Angels finish up with the Mariners in the series. So the matchups might favor a team like the Rays if they can get into that final series and be within striking distance.
Baltimore 7-3 last 10 2-game losing streak. Only now for the wild card up plus 0.5 games, a half a game.
A half game is not a lot,
especially with how much they had previously.
Yeah, and that half game is on second place Oakland, but still, only 2.5 from being knocked out by the Angels, 3.5 from the Rays from being completely knocked out. If the Rays can win their games, and they should be able to win the next 2 against Boston, given. They should be able to take 2 out of 3 from Chicago, even though Chicago's got the world to play for because they don't have that backup option. Not that the Rays do at this point for a division title. That'll be the series that decides those 2 team season. One will go on and one might not.
Playoff before the playoffs, and what do you think about having those 1-game playoffs for the first year ever?
I'm
one
not a
game
big fan.
deciding the entire season.
I'm not a big fan of it. I wish they would go to something like a 6-team if they're going to expand, or to have just left it. I do like that they're putting a premium on winning your division, where if you get in, you do still have to win that game. But at the same time, 1 game, you've been battling 162, 163 games possibly, 164 to actually make the real playoffs because you got to play an extra one possible. You got to plan ahead. Now, given, I think this is a great setup for a team like the Rays who can throw out David Price all the way down to Alex Cobb and feel confident that they're going to have a quality pitching outing.
Not quite as much lately.
Not as much lately, but he's still around 500 with some mid-4 ERA at worst. So he's still going to be able to play well. He's still going to give them a shot when they go out there. There are teams that you get to their 5th start and they go, well, offense needs to show up today.
Or, okay, bullpen's going to get stretched.
Yeah, bullpen, be ready on a minute's notice kind of thing. So
be ready after the first inning.
So, looking ahead, I think the Rays matchups, if they can manage to win the games they're supposed to against Boston.
And hit.
And keep hitting. But if they can win the games against Boston, given it's going to be Price, Shields, and I believe Hellickson going up against Boston the next couple days. Price went last night. Chicago, depending on where they're at in their lineup for pitching, could be a good matchup, but they are going to get Matt Moore, Cobb, and then probably Price again.
Yeah, they're going to have to put out Price when it's this time of year.
Yeah, Price might get that start at the end of the Chicago series, and if it's possible and needed, he might go in the series closer against Baltimore, if that determines a playoff spot. So it could be very, very interesting to see just where these cards fall. But I think the matchups work out fairly well for the Rays. I know you say that the last time the White Sox and the Rays played, the White Sox kind of throttled them. Sale, of course, with the perfect game earlier this year. I just don't think that the White Sox are as good of a team as the Rays. And the Rays are playing pretty well. I mean, they had that little divot in the middle of this good run they've had. But they started September fairly strong, had a few rougher games, and now they're on a 6-game winning streak again. So what do you think? I know we looked online, the Rays' chances according to Cool Standings is around 12.5%. But what do you think the odds are that the Rays make it?
Well, it's one of those things. After last year, after 162, after Evan Longoria, and even though it was eliminated in the first round by the Texas Rangers, again, sort of feeling like that deja vu feeling, like we've seen this before back in the days, like when the Bucks would get into the playoffs.
When Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I'm not even a Bucks fan. I know where that reference is going.
It's just like, okay, here comes Philadelphia. It's just like they had two things, that roadblocks they had to get through. Had to get through, number one, winning in the cold, which was always thrown in the Bucks' face every single time they went in the postseason. Number two was they can't get past the Eagles. The Texas Rangers, granted without the cold, obviously, because it's Arlington, but the Texas Rangers are the Philadelphia Eagles for these Rays.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like, when the Bucks got past the Eagles, they went on to the Super Bowl, they won it. Going to hockey, when the Canucks, they kept running into Chicago, getting knocked out. The year they got past Chicago,
Lightning went through Flyers to get to the Stanley Cup.
They have to go through those teams to make it. Chicago got knocked out by Vancouver the year Vancouver went, as you said, the Flyers ran in. They were knocking out the Lightning year after year after year. They play them again. Finally, the Lightning break through. They go on and win, given Vancouver lost the Stanley Cup. But you have to beat those teams. It's one of those, to be the best, you have to beat the best. And I can completely see it.
I've heard that before from a wrestler.
And I can completely see if the Rays make the playoffs, they end up going into Texas, having to win that series. I do think the Rays would fare better in a 7-game series as opposed to a 5-game series, because you'll see a little more David Price. You have a little more time, as opposed to, okay, Price just pitched in the last game of the season to get in, or the wild card game to get in.
Which has to affect the rotation.
But you can pitch him in Game 3 and then maybe Game 6, as opposed to, well, he's only getting one start this series.
When it's the playoffs, you got to have the short rest.
Yeah, because last year, given Matt Moore came out and floored the Rangers in Game 1.
Everyone was just like,
what just hit us? But Price had a bad game, to be fair. Shields had a bad game, to be fair. But they only got one start out of 5. Or 4, I should say, because they only won 4. I think it would have been better had they played a 7-game series to kind of calm down, because every game in a 5-game series is a little bit more meaningful, because you can only lose so many, and it's one less than normal. So, but what do you think? If you had to put a number on it, what do you think the Rays' chances are?
As in percentile?
Percentile.
I'm gonna have to be a little bit more optimistic than the Cool Standings or than MLB.com. Not way more where I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and putting an energy shot in. I'll say 20%. I think I was going to say 20% because Rays will not go quietly into the September night.
I'm going to say 45. And a lot of that is because...
You are drinking the Kool-Aid with the energy shot.
I am drinking the Kool-Aid. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that the other wildcard teams, the Athletics and the Angels in particular, are playing the Rangers, who are right now the class of the AL. If we look at Baltimore, I don't think that they're going to do very well against Boston, because it's Boston, it's late season, this team hasn't been there before. I think at some point they're going to have a rougher time getting through those games. They're going to start to feel that pressure. The Rays have been behind.
And Baltimore tonight at Camden, playing Blue Jays, wrapping up that series. Then they have the Red Sox for 3. Then, of course, they are at the Rays to close out regular season.
Yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see what happens going down the stretch into early October, just to see where these two teams are.
And Orioles, it says Markakis, really no timetable for return right now. So that's definitely one of their big bets out of the lineup.
Yeah, they have Toronto tonight at Baltimore. I don't know if I really would want that matchup. I mean, the Blue Jays haven't been playing the best. They've been out of it for a while.
Blue Jays can score.
But the Blue Jays,
they can score.
They took one of the doubleheader games on Monday. They did lose last
night. That was
night.
A sweat because Baltimore won 1 and Toronto took 1-1.
Yeah. So, I mean, Baltimore lost last night to them. They lost Monday. They actually have lost the last 3 days, given they've split the doubleheader. So they're not necessarily playing their best. They have the Red Sox. It might be in Baltimore, but it's still the Red Sox. And then in Tampa. I think that bodes well for Tampa, but I really think the Athletics or the team is going to falter going down the stretch. But as we move on from baseball and into
rounding third, heading for home, at least as far as this subject is concerned.
Yes, and we're going to talk quickly about the scores from Week 3, just to update all of you who may or may not know exactly what happened in every game.
There were more games than the Monday Night Football game, even though that was the main focus and the most talked about subject on pretty much every show, podcast.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Essentially that was the only thing that happened. But in Week 3, of course, the Giants throttling Carolina on the Thursday nighter 36-7. The Jets played the Dolphins. The Dolphins had 2 opportunities to win that game on field goals. Both times were missed. The Jets won 23-20 on a second chance field goal after the Dolphins actually got in and blocked the original kick, but the timeout to freeze the kicker bites them there. They won 23. The Jets won 23-20. The Rams go to Chicago and get beaten 23-6. Buffalo, no surprise, 24-14 over Cleveland. The Buccaneers, that was an ugly game.
Oof.
No matter how you look at it, from whatever point of view.
I only got to keep track of about maybe the first quarter or so. I was keeping from all the tweets, had to go and do the work thing. And I could just tell. I mean, even without watching or listening to the game, you could just tell how both teams were trying to see who doesn't want to win the game more. It wasn't a case of which team wants to excel, penalty after penalty for the Cowboys. And then you had the Bucs that couldn't capitalize on any of those penalties. And so much, by the way, for my ballsy fantasy move of the week, because the whole thing I was putting out there on Twitter and also on Facebook said, you know what, here's a call, I'm feeling right. You know, when you have this brilliant, what you think's a brilliant idea at the time. Man, I'm feeling that Josh Freeman's going to have a better week than Eli Manning. Then, of course, the Thursday night game happened. And Thursday night games either have a tendency, one of two things, either really, really good or really, really bad. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, and then you're looking at the Sunday, you're going, oh crap, this guy's already only got 3 points. I'm already missing a guy that's an opportunity I wasted. But if you have a guy like Eli or Brown come out of nowhere and put up a monster game, you go, I'm sitting in a nice place where he's going to have a hard time catching up. And then your other fantasy move of the weekend was benching Torrey Smith. And given the situation of his brother passing away early that morning,
I was thinking that was like family first.
It's very tough.
He's not going to be in the right mind. Most folks would want to just take the night off, and then he goes and has the game of his life dedicated to his brother.
Yeah, and
he was on my bench.
I played him, and I played him because I heard he wanted to play. And that was the reason I didn't bench him, was because when I heard what happened, I had also heard he wants to play, and the coaching staff said, if you want to play, you're able to play. We're not going to hold you out. And I thought back to Brett Favre the day after his father died, when he threw 4 or 5 touchdowns and 300,
being serious,
almost 400 yards against Oakland.
That was a Monday night game, wasn't it?
Monday night game, and unbelievable. I mean, throwing the ball between 3 receivers, or 3 defenders into arms.
That was the game of Brett Favre's life, being serious.
100% serious. So I was thinking along that mindset. I'm like, you know what? If he's going to come out that soon after, because I think it was either a day or 2 after Brett Favre's father died, he came out, he's either going to come out and lay an egg because he's so mentally distracted, and the coaching staff will pull him and say, look, if you need to rest your head, go over there.
Escape into your work
Or,
thing.
And you got to think, between family and being a brother, a lot of these players' connections to their, especially male relatives, is going to be through football. So this might be the best way for him to say, I'm thinking about you, bro. You are my brother. I've gone and played with you. Or, father, you taught me the game. I want to go out there and make you proud. And that's, I think, what he did. And you can kind of see after that first touchdown and before the game when he's, kind of holding back tears, that there was something more than he's dead. It was something more of a connection. So, if you played him, you were rewarded. If not, looks bad, but very, very impressive regardless of whether or not you played him. And
that's something when you don't break down the game, you don't really look at it from a fantasy angle, since what happened was the death of his brother. That takes precedence over any other way of looking at
exactly
that game for him.
And we'll get to that game in a little bit also. But picking up where we were leaving off, Dallas winning that ugly game with Tampa 16-10.
Is Josh Freeman droppable in most fantasy formats?
I guarantee he is. One of the bigger upsets of the weekend was Tennessee beating Detroit in overtime, 44-41.
I don't think any of us saw that coming at all.
Yeah, it was the first time in a few years that there was 3 overtime games in the same day. Jacksonville beating Indianapolis late, 22-17. Arguably the biggest upset of the year, given where I think we expect the Vikings to finish. Beating the Niners 24-13. I know last week with the Cardinals was a big one, but this one I think was a little bigger. The Chiefs going into New Orleans, coming back and winning that game.
What was the worst loss? Other than you have Packers and Seahawks. Let's take that one out of it, because that was, you could argue, a lot of people are
We'll get into why that one doesn't count.
Taking that one out for obvious reasons, what happened? What was the number one biggest, holy crap, I can't believe that team lost for week 3?
I don't think it was that the team lost, because I picked the Cardinals to win, but the way that they beat the Eagles. 27-6. At home given, but the Eagles...
Is Michael Vick still Andy Reid's quarterback?
We'll
you might have
see.
heard that question this week.
He's given the for now monocle.
Or
it's not. Oh yeah, he's definitely. He is right now.
Or that's like the other time, I forget which quarterback, whether it was Kevin Kolb or Don McMahon. When you can tell, being the Toastmaster that I am, and he goes, even before he said that he is, and he goes, yes, can tell. There's a little bit of hesitation, and then of course right after that, quarterback was traded. So.
Yeah. Cincinnati beating Washington 38-31. Washington's got a team that's mostly offense, it looks like, at this point.
I just saw that Roy Halou was actually placed on IR today. So.
Yeah, Roy Halou is out,
the Redskins also signed Ryan Grant. Picked him up on waivers.
Yeah, former Packer Ryan Grant now.
Although, who would you have as a quick audible for the overstart? Since I remember you were bringing up, why is everyone picking up Tashard Choice? So, if it was a question of, let's say, for a flex position, not your RB1 or RB2, would you rather start Ryan Grant or Tashard Choice this week, and why?
Well, I don't think those are particularly strong options either way. I do think you'd want to go
flex option.
I do think you'd want to go Ryan Grant, simply because that's a more offensive-minded team. Buffalo against Cleveland put up 24, against the Jets put up 28.
Cleveland is just offensive.
Yeah, Cleveland is not the strongest. I mean, the Jets' defense was stronger before the Darrell Revis blown ACL on getting juked by backup running back Daniel Thomas.
That one song, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, and that was one of the weird injuries, because he got juked out by the backup running back, which was amazing to see as a Dolphins fan. But going back to the actual question, I would play Ryan Grant just because they're a little more offensive-minded. They've put up about 30 points each game. They've also given up 30 points each game.
They're the Redskins.
Well, they give up 32, 31, and then 38. And they've scored, I believe, 40, 31, and 28. So I think you want to play the team that's just got a better offensive track record.
And what do you think, even though we're saving the main whole thing about the refs for the main course of the podcast to consume, but There are other ramifications with the replacement officials. Of course, Mike Shanahan, fine, and Bill Belichick just before we started podcasting and was fined $50,000 for putting his arm on the ref. So, if you think about that for Belichick, that means that he now totals about $550,000 in fines, and he's cost the Patriots, though I think just about any owner, the entire NFL will be. Let's see. How many Super Bowl rings? How many trophies is that? Yeah, I'll pay that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot, but it's not as much as people want to make it out to these coaches and to these players. However, keeping going, we already mentioned Philadelphia losing to Arizona 27-6. Atlanta beating San Diego 27-3 fairly handily. Houston putting Denver at 1-2, 31-25. One of the bigger upsets again, Oakland beating Pittsburgh 34-31. Of course, the Torrey Smith game, 31-30 on a very, very poorly reffed game again throughout. It got actually better.
Seems to be a trend.
It seems like they're getting worse instead of better. But they won 31-30 on a questionable field goal call right over the upright, but it is tough. And I'm glad that ref was decisive when he wasn't like, I don't know. He was like, it's good, no question about it.
Call it maybe.
Ugh, yes, the Call Me Maybe remix Call It Maybe
posted
on
YouTube. On the Sports Shuffle Facebook page. You can find it there. It's worth a listen.
Yeah, it's quite hilarious, actually. And then, of course, the Monday Nighter where Seattle Astros wins 14-12 on the game-winning...
Is that a name that was actually put through to all of the owners of the NFL and ratified as their new name?
I just want to say that my favorite tweet that I've heard or seen was actually read on SportsCenter after the game, saying Russell Wilson is arguably the first person to ever throw a game-winning interception. Because he did. He threw the ball to the wrong guy and won the game.
It is remarkable we have gone 27 minutes and have not directly until now referenced.
Yeah, and I think now is the time to do it.
Although, real quickly, just back to Bill Belichick, there was a really cool tweet by, speaking of Twitter, says, we all might have occasionally participated in that social media platform, by Mike Freeman of CBS from @RealFreemanCBS to put the Bill Belichick fine into proper perspective. I read this before the show, and we were both like, wow. Bill Belichick's reported salary is 7.5. Hang on, I have to do like the Doctor Evil. 7.5 million, which means $50,000. He probably wishes it was $50. $50,000 fine is less than 1% of the salary. So for us normal people, that would be like a person making $60,000 a year being fined $402. Putting it into perspective.
Or somebody in our job situation being robbed of the change in their car.
Pretty much.
And I say that a little more sarcastically, but it's not exactly untrue.
When are we ever sarcastic? We're never sarcastic.
I don't know what that word means. But that being said, that also brings into the... kind of ties nicely into the officials discussion we're about to have, because frankly it needs to be discussed.
Flag on your phone case.
Yes, flag on the phone case. Clean it up. I gotta multitask at some point. But of course,
we'll make
the
a
refs,
federal case about it. No promise. But
of course, the real referees, not these hacks and zebra stripes.
I don't know what sound a zebra makes. Do you know what sound a zebra makes?
Well, obviously they just blow whistles and then throw colored hankies that don't make any sense, and make the wrong call. The JKFL, the Just Kidding Football League, as I'm going to start calling it until the real refs are back. The refs who are normally there, the real ones, not like I said, the hacks, they want a pension plan. So essentially, when they retire, they're going to still have some sort of income from the NFL, which I don't blame them for. I mean,
when you have outgo, you need the end of the con.
Yes, exactly. So I don't necessarily disagree with them, and I'm glad that They are still talking. It looks like it's going to be close. Of course, we're probably going to be subjugated to one more week of insulting refereeing by the JKFL headquarters.
Did you see how many voicemails were left on Roger Goodell's voice?
I thought it was 70,000, I think, yeah.
And then the other post by Matthew Berry from ESPN, who said, how many leagues was it? How many players affected?
67,000 fantasy games, I believe. Not players.
Just
games.
Games. Just a few.
Were directly altered. The result was directly affected and changed by that last play, whether you had Golden Tate, Russell Wilson, or the Packers defense.
And that was also what you mentioned from Vegas.
And the Vegas, the line was, I believe, 2.5 or 3.
Well, I saw one of the line was -3. You saw 3.5.
I've heard, depending on where you bet, it was somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5. Either way, the Packers are covering when they're up by 5. Seattle actually wins the game. Of course, at that point they cover the spread.
14-12.
It was about a $1 billion swing. Now, whether or not that's Vegas taking the hit or taking the money, that's a big number.
$1 billion,
either way.
you can buy your own attack sub with that.
$1 billion, you could buy probably 2 NHL teams.
Good ones?
Phoenix. Phoenix was a conference finalist. I think San Jose.
As long as it's not like the Blue Jackets,
I'm sure you could buy the Blue Jackets for a nickel and hand job, honestly. Not to be a little too racy, but at this point, the Blue Jackets are...
Disclaimer, the following portion of the Sports Shuffle may have been inappropriate for certain ages. Parental guidance might have been suggested.
Yes, PG-13. That's the all crazy all the time. But it's true.
Although compared to some of the stuff out there...
Well, if your kids were able to read the Twitter quotes from the Packers players, that phrase is not bad.
The one player who went off and basically he said bleep the NFL. If you want to find me, go ahead and find me. And then he had said I think next day, and I'd like to welcome my new 70,000 followers. It was something to say like that. One of the offensive linemen.
Yeah, number 70. I can't remember his name offhand. I think it was Lang. Yes, Lang. He, I guess, originally got effed by the NFL. Effed by the refs.
I saw that tweet.
Thanks, NFL. And then later he did say, if you're going to find me, F and do it because I don't give an F. And it was... I don't blame him, honestly. And I was watching Mike and Mike because I was enthralled with how this was going to play out. And the next day, they had really good bits about it. They played the Monday Night Football live feed, which I think Mike Tirico did a pretty good job of calling that amid all the chaos and confusion.
Can you imagine what Gruden would have been like if he had been the coach of the Packers on the sideline?
Well, if you heard him during the game, during the confusion, he was like, "This game is leaving a bad taste in my mouth. That's
him up in the booth. Could you imagine?
That's exactly it.
Could you imagine if he had been the coach of the Packers as the screw job was on?
I'm pretty sure he'd have pulled Golden Tate down by the face mask and started uppercutting him through the pads into his jaw.
How many expletives do you think he would have?
A ton of them. But at the same time, they made a point that everybody's kind of upset about this play as fans. If that happened to your team, though, how much worse would it be?
Another angle, unintended pun, but another angle to look at this is, if this wasn't a national game, if this wasn't a Monday Night Football game, if this didn't involve such a marquee team as the Packers, would there have been as much outcry?
The only other game it could have happened during and gotten this much attention would have been the Sunday night game. That's the only other one because it is in prime time, and the Packers
the
Ravens.
That's the game where I think Faith Hill's dress keeps shrinking.
Yeah, essentially. But it's the Patriots and the Ravens in that game, two big-time teams. That would have been the only game they could have gotten. If it had happened in the Dolphins-Jets games, per se, or the Chiefs-Saints game, early day game, where there's another 9 or 10 games going on, I don't think it gets any notice. I really don't. However, happening on Monday night, and I love the new Monday Night Football commercials because it all comes down to Monday night as their tagline, and you see what happens on Monday night.
What they really mean is
everybody watches.
Everybody's single fantasy league comes down.
The new one is about fantasy. It's essentially this guy who's like this kind of, you find out later, so it's like overweight, kind of out of shape guy, works in an office, but he's up like 167 to 128 in fantasy, and he's going to work, and he's like putting on a shirt, he's got these six-pack abs, he pulls up in like this nice Ferrari to work, his secretary's like, I got you coffee, and she's all hot, and he puts up 167 on a piece of paper, puts it on the window, and the guy he's playing walks by, and he goes, 2 players left, and reality sets in. He looks fat, the secretary's overweight, he's driving this broken down yellow pile of garbage car, and he ends up losing on Monday night by a couple points because it wasn't over yet. And it's just, especially with how that game ended last Monday, with that last play deciding 67,000 games.
Both of us are used to either way going, holy crap, I can't believe I've got getting into this fantasy specific, since I know none of y'all out there, you only care about your fantasy team, not ours. But we've all been there where it's like, it's either been, holy spit, I can't believe that I lost by 1 point, or I can't really, I'm up by 30. How was I? I was down by 40.
Yeah, it's funny.
We've been on both ends of that.
But the JKFL, these replacement refs...
That's one of the nicer names I've heard for the Football League after.
And I don't blame Goodell. I don't. Because he is a worker of the owners.
Well,
the owners are the ones doing this.
Well, there's no honest possible way that you have the NFL, you have, as they have been referred to, the Shield. Right?
Yes, the Shield.
The Shield. Not Shield, Nick Fury, and Avengers, which like way cooler anyway. And you've got like Iron Man, which can fly and like shoot repulsor beams. But it's like tangent back to what I was tangenting off of. When you're talking about the Shield, there's no way when you have the Shield, when you have Roger Goodell, who's the Captain America, ooh, good analogy, of the NFL Shield, and he has the Shield. And if he goes and does what I think should have been the right thing, one of the very first times ever that a commissioner and a league should have overturned a result. I know there are some people out there that say, Joel, you're whack, you're crazy. Yeah, okay, so what else you have that's not news? Okay, everybody knows I'm crazy. But in all seriousness, they should have overturned the play, but they can't because of their current philosophy. They're the Shield. They're supporting their refs, as horrible and as crappy as they are. I don't see any way that they could have done that and turned around and contradicted themselves.
Yeah, it was a pretty pathetic display. And that was the one where I kept coming back to as pathetic. But I think the best thing I saw the next day was actually from Mike and Mike. And they were talking about the radio feed from Seattle and how that guy did an amazing job. Because if it was, given, this is the biased radio cast for Seattle. And if you listen to radio locally, you'll get the Tampa Bay feed, of course. And he's like, he caught it! And they played a bit that they put together, I'm sure. And it was like, if I was calling that game, and it was my team, it would have sounded like this. He caught the bleeping ball! There's no bleeping time! How the bleep did he catch that bleeping pass? I can't bleeping believe what I just bleeping saw! And like, that would be exactly how I called that. Because I'd be excited, but I'd have lost all coherent able to function and not say something that I can't say.
That the program director would be like, Ryan, can you come in the office for a couple minutes?
Yeah, they'd be like, I understand you're excited, but shut the bleep up and stop bleeping this up. But we haven't even gotten into how egregious the call was and how... I don't think we have to get into how bad the call was.
It wasn't that one as well, because one of the things that I like doing, I like multitasking, and I enjoy the social media platforms out there, and it's amazing how you can just use Twitter, or Twitter's even better than Facebook, I would say, especially for keeping track of football. And I lost track of not just that last, because if it was only one, using your word, egregious, only one egregious, ooh, I like that, we'll make that the word of the day, egregious. only call that was bad. The number of times that I saw people, and not just one person, but different people, tweet out, "Are you bleeping kidding me? What the bleep kind of call was that?" For both teams, not just the Packers, not just Seattle, for both teams. "Are you kidding me? He called this on that player." Just endless.
And we got to wrap this up, and we'll do another one with our picks for next week and our final thoughts, generic sponsors in a second. But we're running out of time for this one.
This is one of those things that only happens once every
year.
5 blue moons.
But for me, and this is, I think, the final thought I want to bring up for this, is that there used to be a set of commercials for Ally Bank, and their tagline was, "If it's so obvious for a kid, why isn't it obvious for a bank?" Now, I live with two men. One is a diehard Stone Cold Packers fan, plus a Packers owner because they are publicly owned. He actually has bought stock in the company. He obviously is not happy with the call because it was wrong, frankly. But as a biased fan anyways, you're going to be like, that was awful. And he doesn't actually see how many calls the Packers got earlier in the game. However, we did talk about it and told him, when the defense is getting calls against them and they're egregiously bad, you notice it more. And when they're driving and they get the pass interference, the roughing the passer that negates an interception, that frankly both of them were bad calls in themselves, and everything that they missed, and they won't call offensive pass interference on the last play, but that was pathetic. I mean, that's almost assault, the way he pushed them. But it's bad enough when you're biased and you see the play. It's bad enough when you're an educated sports fan. The other person I live with does not follow sports whatsoever. He couldn't tell you the rules of the coin toss in overtime of a playoff game.
So he could qualify as a replacement ref?
Yes, absolutely. But he could not tell you the rules of overtime, the coin toss overtime, what gets you a first down most likely. And he looks at this play, and I'm watching the game as he walks in the end of the game, he sits down, and I'm sitting there for 2 minutes just with my mouth open, stunned that this just happened, because I have no words to explain it. And he's like, "What happened?" I said, "The Packers just lost the game on probably the worst call that's ever happened." And he watched it, because they replayed it 15 to 20 times easily during that game while they're reviewing the call, and the refs are butchering it. And he just asked me, he's like, "Well, didn't the Packers guy catch the ball?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Then what's the problem?" "They said Seattle caught it." He's like, "But that's not what happened."
And this is a total non-sports, non-football fan.
He is a sports infant. Like, there are people that you see on ESPN that are sports Einsteins, sports geniuses. They've studied. This guy is a sports newborn baby, doesn't know how to eat himself in the sports world at all. He could not support himself. If I said, "Hey, you got to go to a football stadium," he wouldn't even know where the front door was, probably, or how to get in, or anything. And he came home last night and he said, "You know what I spent an absorbent amount of time thinking about today?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "That football game, and I don't like football. I don't like sports." And that's all he was thinking about because it was that far wrong.
That's somebody who's not even into
somebody
sports,
who's not interested,
as
intelligent
like
on
us
sports, or biased in any way, shape, or form towards the outcome of that game.
And he was like, WTF.
And he was just, "I don't believe that I just saw what I just saw, and that it went down that way." But we're going to give this a rest because we are running out of time. Of course, I am Flying Ryan. You can follow me on Twitter at ShuffleRyan13. It's been a little slow for me, but of course, the Tampa Motormouth at Sports Shuffle.
I try to more than make up for the quota.
He's on there all the time. And of course, a happy birthday, belated one day to our Joel Verlin.
Thank you, 23. I mean 43.
And we're going to let him take us out for the day.
And here we go. Thank you all for tuning in, and hope you have a good one.